Everyone at Hawthorne Academy knew the Hawthorne name long before they learned the names of the teachers. It gleamed from the bronze plaque near the front gates, echoed in the way administrators straightened their backs when a black car pulled up, and hovered like an invisible rule over every classroom. Being a Hawthorne meant expectations were automatic, unquestioned, and heavy. Ethan Hawthorne felt that weight every morning as he sat at his desk, hands folded too tightly, eyes fixed on the corner of the chalkboard where numbers and words blurred together. He tried to listen. He really did. But lessons moved like fast trains, and he was always running alongside them, never quite managing to jump on. When the teacher asked a question, his heart would thud painfully, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he didn't even know where the answer might live. Tests were worse. The silence, the ticking clock, the way other students' pencils scratched confidently across paper, it all pressed in on him. His mind would fill with noise, doubts crowding out everything he'd studied the night before. He read questions 3 times, sometimes 4, and still they seemed written in a language just close enough to be cruel. When the papers came back, red marks slashed across the pages like accusations. F. D. Another F. Teachers called him in after class, voices soft, careful, as if speaking too loudly might break something expensive. "You're bright, Ethan," they always said. "You just need to apply yourself." He nodded, because nodding was easier than explaining that he already was. At home, the mansion felt too big for the two of them. The ceilings were high, the hallways long, and sound disappeared into the polished floors. His father's presence was everywhere and nowhere at once, framed magazine covers in the study, awards in glass cases, a voice drifting from conference calls behind closed doors. When Richard Hawthorne did look at his son, it was with concern sharpened by confusion. "I don't understand," he said one evening, scrolling through Ethan's latest report on his tablet. "You have every advantage." Ethan stared at his plate. "I know. Tutors came and went. Some were strict, some friendly, some visibly intimidated by the house itself. They all used different methods, different books, different promises. None of it stuck. After a while, Ethan stopped asking questions altogether. He learned how to smile and say, "Got it," even when he didn't, learned that disappointment was easier to manage when it stayed unspoken. On Thursdays, though, something in the house felt different. The quiet wasn't so sharp then. It softened, warmed by the sounds drifting from the kitchen, running water, clinking dishes, a low hum that turned into a tune. That was Lila's day. She moved through the house with practiced efficiency, her presence barely acknowledged, yet somehow essential. Sometimes, she brought her daughter. Maya would arrive straight from school, backpack slung over one shoulder, uniform neat but clearly lived in. She always greeted Ethan with a quick smile before settling at the long oak table near the kitchen, spreading out her notebooks with a kind of calm confidence that made studying look almost pleasant. Ethan watched her more than he meant to. She didn't freeze over her work the way he did. She read questions slowly, underlined things, whispered to herself as if having a private conversation with the page. When she got stuck, she didn't panic. She tried another angle, flipped pages, drew little boxes and arrows. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal math test, Ethan came home feeling hollow. He dropped his backpack by the door harder than intended. Papers slid out and scattered across the floor, white rectangles against dark wood. "Whoa," Maya said, looking up. "Rough day." He exhaled sharply. "You could say that." She stood and knelt to help gather the papers. Her eyes flicked over the test before he could stop her. He waited for the familiar look, sympathy mixed with discomfort, the silent judgment he'd grown used to. Instead, she frowned, thoughtful. "This question," she said, tapping the page, "what did you think it was asking?" "I don't know," he snapped, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry. I never know." Maya didn't take offense. She sat back on her heels. "You know more than you think. You're just trying to hold everything in your head at once. That's what studying is." She shook her head. "That's what memorizing is." He watched her pull a folded sheet from her bag. It was covered in colors, highlighters, small drawings, arrows looping between words. It looked nothing like his own dense, cramped notes. "My mom says my brain runs fast," Maya said. "So I give it pictures to slow it down." Ethan stared. "Teachers hate drawings. Teachers love correct answers," she replied lightly. "How you get there is your business." She began explaining fractions by turning them into people sharing slices of bread, equations into balancing acts on a seesaw. Her voice was steady, patient. She didn't rush him. When he hesitated, she waited. When he got something wrong, she didn't correct him immediately, she asked why he thought that way, then gently nudged him toward another path. Something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once. But enough that Ethan felt his shoulders drop, his breath even out. The numbers stopped glaring at him and started behaving, like they'd finally agreed to be reasonable. Does that make sense? Maya asked. He nodded slowly. Yeah, it actually does. She smiled, bright and unguarded. Good. That means your brain likes stories. Ethan laughed under his breath, surprised at the sound of it. For the first time in a long while, the knot in his chest loosened. He didn't feel stupid. He didn't feel broken. He felt capable. From the hallway, the mansion remained as quiet as ever. But at the oak table, something new had taken root, small, fragile, and quietly powerful. The first time Ethan saw a B circled at the top of his test paper, he didn't celebrate. He sat very still at his desk, fingers resting on the edges of the page, as if too much movement might cause the letter to fade or lift itself off the paper and drift away. Around him, chairs scraped and students compared scores, but the noise felt distant, muffled, like it was happening underwater. He traced the red circle once with his finger. A real grade, not a mercy pass, not a teacher's apology disguised as encouragement. A B he had earned. On the walk home, the paper burned in his backpack. He kept checking to make sure it was still there, unfolding it at a stoplight, smoothing the creases again and again. By the time he reached the front door, something unfamiliar fluttered in his chest. It wasn't relief. It wasn't pride. It was the cautious beginning of trust, in himself. Maya was already at the oak table when he came in, sleeves rolled up, pencil tucked behind her ear. She looked up, read his face, and her eyes widened. Tell me, she said. He didn't speak. He just slid the paper across the table. Her grin spread instantly, warm and genuine. I knew it. They didn't stop at one test. They couldn't. What started as quiet help turned into a routine. Every Thursday, and then more often, Ethan sat beside Maya, spreading his books out while she asked him questions that seemed almost too simple at first. What is this problem really asking? If this were a story, who wants what? Where did it go wrong? She taught him how to slow down without freezing, how to breathe through confusion instead of fighting it. When he got something right, she made him explain it back to her, out loud, until it sounded like his own idea. When he got something wrong, she never sighed or glanced at the clock. She just waited. Grades followed. A in history. Another B in science. His teachers noticed before his father did. One pulled him aside after class and studied him carefully, as if looking for signs of cheating or some sudden, suspicious intelligence. You've changed, she said. Ethan thought of colored diagrams, of equations turned into balance games, of someone finally listening to how his mind worked. I learned how to understand questions, he replied. At home, the atmosphere shifted. Richard Hawthorne stopped glancing through Ethan's reports with tight lips and started reading them. He asked more questions, not sharp ones, not disappointed ones, but curious ones. How did you approach this? He asked one evening. Ethan hesitated, then answered honestly. I broke it into pieces. Richard nodded, as if filing the answer away. One night, passing the kitchen, Richard paused. Ethan and Maya were bent over a notebook, heads close together, laughing quietly at a stick figure drawing trying to hold up an equation like a barbell. Richard watched from the doorway longer than he intended to. Who's your tutor? He asked. Ethan startled. Maya stood instinctively, hands folding in front of her, already preparing to step back into the role the house had assigned her. Ethan felt a flash of panic. This fragile thing, this progress, felt suddenly at risk. Maya, he said, before she could speak. She's been helping me. The silence that followed was heavy. Richard's gaze moved from his son to the girl in the slightly worn uniform, then to the notebooks spread across the table. He picked one up, flipping through pages of diagrams and handwritten stories. This is different, he said slowly. Maya swallowed. I just explain things the way I understand them, sir. Richard closed the notebook carefully. It's working. The next week, an envelope appeared on the oak table. Thick, cream-colored. Lila froze when she saw the letterhead. Her hands shook as she opened it. A full scholarship. Tuition. Books. Transportation. No conditions. No fine print. Lila sank into a chair, tears spilling freely. Maya stared at the paper, stunned, as if the words might rearrange themselves if she looked too closely. Ethan watched, heart pounding, afraid and hopeful all at once. You deserve it, he said quietly. The results came faster after that. Ethan didn't just pass his finals, he ranked near the top of his class. The same teachers who once spoke gently around him now spoke with admiration. The word, potential, returned, but this time it sounded earned. At the award ceremony, the auditorium buzzed with polite excitement. Parents leaned forward with phones ready. Richard Hawthorne sat in the front row, composed and proud, but his eyes kept drifting back. Maya sat beside her mother, hands folded tightly in her lap. She still looked like she didn't quite believe she was meant to be there. When Ethan's name was called, the applause was loud. He walked to the stage, lights warm on his face, heart pounding in a way that felt good this time. He took the certificate, then stepped toward the microphone. The room quieted. "I didn't get here alone," he said. His voice didn't shake. "Some people teach you answers. Some people teach you how to think." That made all the difference. His gaze found Maya's. She blinked rapidly, smiling through tears. The applause came again, stronger now, though many in the room didn't fully understand why. Ethan did. The secret hadn't been diagrams or stories or colors on a page. It had been patience. Being seen. Being taught in a language his mind could finally understand, and that, he knew, would stay with him long after the grades stopped mattering.